In this video series, we will investigate the Prince Crossing Depot and Substation in West Chicago, DuPage County, Illinois. Once a lonely outpost in the west suburbs of Chicago, a conduit of electrical power to the Chicago Aurora and Elgin Railroad, as well as to surrounding communities. A transportation depot serving a home for disabled children, and a Christian preparatory school, enabling them to spring to life and thrive. Now, in the winter of a purpose-filled life, the building is in imminent danger of demolition.
Primary sources for this video include AE&C and CA&E records, contemporary trade and industry periodicals, contemporary newspaper accounts, contemporary plat maps, DuPage County parcel and deed records, contemporary photographs.
The Aurora Elgin and Chicago Railroad once had great plans for this station and the land just beyond it to the west. In its earliest incarnation, in 1900, the AE&C's Central Railroad shops, along with a freight interchange with the Chicago Great Western, were to be located here at Ingalton, later Prince Crossing. The railroad purchased a few dozen acres adjacent to the crossing with the Chicago Great Western Railroad for this purpose. But plans changed.
In 1902, the railroad instead constructed one of their 6 electric substations here, well-built and fireproof brick buildings, especially designed to transform high-voltage electric alternating current from the railroad's power plant in Batavia to lower-voltage direct current to power the railroad cars. This was known as Ingalton Substation No. 5, along the Elgin line between Wheaton and Elgin. So named as the nearest community, the small village of Ingalton lay 1 mile due west.
We've discussed the role and design of these interurban substations at great length in an earlier Clintonville series, and so we will not repeat that information here, except to highlight similarities and differences. We suggest that you watch all or portions of that series to become fully acquainted with the purpose and design of these structures. But as a quick summary, the Aurora Elgin and Chicago Railroad was powered by electricity, power that the railway itself generated in a large coal-fired steam generator powerhouse on the banks of the Fox River in Batavia, Kane County, Illinois. This powerhouse generated 26,000-volt three-phase alternating current, sent overland via high-voltage wires to 6 substations located in Cook, DuPage, and Kane Counties, Illinois, including the substation at Ingalton. These 6 substations then transformed and converted the electrical power to 600 volts of direct current, which was applied to the AE&C Railroad's third rail. Electric motors on each of the train cars converted this electricity to mechanical power, which drove the train at speeds of up to 70 miles per hour.
The Ingalton substation and yard was built upon land once owned by John Benjamin, and later his son Robert Benjamin. The acreage for the Chicago Great Western Crossing and associated yard, a short distance to the west, was purchased by the AE&C Railroad from Frank Wiesbrook. This large space was originally intended to be a freight interchange with the Chicago Great Western.
In early days, the Ingalton substation served as a flag stop along the Elgin line, but saw little passenger traffic owing to its placement in a rural setting. However, like the other substations in the AE&C network, at Maywood, Lombard, Warrenville, Aurora, and Clintonville, Ingalton Substation No. 5 began providing excess electrical power to farms and industry along the railroad route. This was a time when there were no large-scale electrical utilities in the area, and these interurban substations played a key transformative role in the transition of communities from horse, steam, and water power to electrical power. The AE&C was then, by far, the largest electrical power producer in the western suburbs of Chicago, extending to the Fox River. In 1911, the AE&C obtained a long-term franchise for both commercial lighting and street lighting for the city of West Chicago, transmitting 2,300 volts at 25 hertz over 3 wires to the young city.
The electric AE&C railroad and electrical power were reshaping the west suburban landscape. Indeed, it was the proximity to the railroad which attracted the well-known Chicago charity, the Home for Destitute Crippled Children, to establish a convalescent home here for children in the early 1910s. This charity had been founded in Chicago in the early 1890s. Dr. Isaac Prince was one of the founders and a longtime superintendent for the charitable facility. Prince, originally from New York, had been a missionary in Jamaica for 10 years and a chaplain during the Civil War, before taking on his charitable mission in Chicago. By the early 1900s, the charity sought to build a branch in the suburbs in order to create a suitable place for recovery from respiratory illnesses or medical procedures, away from the industrial pollution and soot of the city.
Due to the fundraising efforts of philanthropist Joan Pinkerton Chalmers, daughter of Alan Pinkerton of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, and wife to industrialist William J. Chalmers, almost $150,000 were raised, about $3.3 million in today's money, so as to build the country home for destitute, crippled children in 1910 and 1911 on 26 acres, just to the south of the Ingalton Substation. This home was intended as a convalescent center for children who had had medical procedures at the Chicago facility and needed a longer recovery time in the clean country air of West DuPage County. The site was personally selected by Joan Chalmers, partly owing to its proximity to the Ingalton commuter railroad station.
Dr. Isaac Prince did not live to see the rural facility put to use, however, as he died of pneumonia in early January of 1911 at the age of 76 years. He was interred in Arlington Cemetery in Elmhurst, Illinois, next to his wife, Caroline Meserole Prince. Sadly, Isaac Prince has no monument to mark his grave.
The first group of 20 children to make use of the new facility was personally escorted there by Joan Pinkerton Chalmers, most likely via the Aurora Elgin and Chicago train in July of 1911. Here, she would have noticed the lack of a proper passenger waiting room at the Ingalton substation, as it was then the same basic design as the Clintonville and Aurora substations, with little more than a rough cinder passenger platform and a small awning to protect waiting passengers from the elements. But this would not suit their new philanthropic facility, where visitors, guests, staff, and patients would have to come and go from this rather Spartan depot. Chalmers, a person of some affluence and influence, would no doubt have bent the ears of the AE&C management, demanding better accommodation for train passengers.
In September of 1913, the AE&C awarded contracts for a new brick addition on the east side of the Ingalton substation, about 15 feet wide and 20 feet deep, in order to create a heated passenger waiting room and a dispatcher's office. This transformed the Ingalton station into something closer to the Maywood, Lombard, and Warrenville substations, which all had originally been designed and built with waiting rooms and dispatcher offices when the railroad was first built back in 1902. The Prince Crossing addition was likely completed in 1914.
And it was at about this time in the mid-1910s when we first start to see the use of the Prince Crossing name to denote the recently improved station. The Prince was to posthumously honor Dr. Isaac Prince, while the crossing referred to the AE&C's crossing with the Chicago Great Western Railroad, less than 2,000 feet west of the station. Today, a copse of trees blocks the view to the west of the Prince Crossing Depot. But while the railroad was in operation, the crossing was a prominent feature in the landscape.
The next major change to come to the newly coined Prince Crossing Station occurred after the dissolution of the AE&C in the late 1910s, which reorganized as the Chicago Aurora and Elgin Railway in the early 1920s, led by Dr. Thomas Conway. Since the time of the electric railway's origins 20 years earlier in the 1900 timeframe, electric public utilities had become a reality, able to provide reliable electric power and extending their reach across much of the Chicago metropolitan area. Samuel Insull's Public Service Company of Northern Illinois was a dominant player in this market.
Through 1925, the Prince Crossing substation yet relied upon the original power equipment that had been installed, akin to the equipment installed at Clintonville, a set of transformers that stepped down the 26,000 volts of 25 hertz alternating current to 660 volts AC, and two General Electric 500 kilowatt rotary converters that converted the alternating current to 600 volts of direct current. This equipment was all manually operated from a master control panel located on the east side of the original building's interior. In fact, the CA&E had only made modest upgrades to their electrical infrastructure over the previous few decades, with only a handful of automated substations, the newest labor-saving technology, installed and operational, these being at Warrenville, Wheaton, and Bellwood.
In January of 1926, the CA&E entered into an agreement with Insull's Public Service Company of Northern Illinois to provide all the necessary 600 volt of direct current power to their trains and railway, at the same time leasing the railroad's electrical infrastructure, including the substations such as Prince Crossing, to the power company. The contract also allowed for the PSC of Northern Illinois to make any and all necessary upgrades to their equipment, especially in the domain of automated substations and conversion from 25 Hz to 60 Hz of alternating current, the newly emerging standard, as long as the utility continued to reliably supply 600 volts of direct current to their railroad. The CA&E's board of directors planned to get out of the power generation business in order to focus on running their railroad.
But in fact, Insull was to flip the script and soon took over the CA&E, both the power generation business and the electric railroad. Insull's broader financial empire was able to infuse fresh cash into the CA&E, resulting in major upgrades to train stations such as the Villa Park Station and Glen Ellen Station, the building of the Westchester Spur, and major upgrades to the electrical infrastructure that powered the railroad. Multiple new automated substations were added in Lombard, Elmhurst, Wheaton, and Forest Park, and all of the electrical equipment of the original substations was to be replaced and upgraded.
This led to the next major addition to the Prince Crossing Station, a large two-story brick structure, which had a primary purpose of housing new substation equipment. We know this, as we will see in a later episode, as the building design included purpose-built wire flues on the north face of the addition, as well as a concrete mezzanine with holes in the floor specific for the electrical power equipment. When the Great Depression hit the United States in late 1929, capital for infrastructure improvements in the CA&E and elsewhere quickly dried up, and so we can bracket this addition to the Prince Crossing structure to between early 1926 and late 1929, most likely in the 1927 to 1928 timeframe.
The country home for crippled children was eventually sold to the University of Chicago in 1938, which may have curtailed passenger traffic to the rural depot. In 1944, the CA&E looked to cut costs and floated the idea of shutting down many of the flag stops along the Elgin branch, including Prince Crossing. But that idea was met by fierce resistance from CA&E commuters along this line, and so service to these stations was continued.
A year later, in 1945, the University of Chicago sold the Children's Hospital facility, including 26 acres, to to Wheaton College Academy, then affiliated with Wheaton College as a preparatory high school. They were able to reuse some of the facility's original buildings as dormitories and classrooms for the new school. Many of the school's local students and faculty used the CA&E trains to bring them to and from school every day. The academy ended its direct affiliation with Wheaton College in 1970, becoming an independent institution, the Wheaton Christian High School, at that time. Later, the institution rebranded as Wheaton Academy in 1995.
Meanwhile, the financially beleaguered CA&E closed down all passenger traffic in July of 1957, on its way towards complete shutdown and bankruptcy. They made an attempt at becoming a local express freight carrier for a period, following the lead of other larger railroads. But by mid-1959, they ceased all railroad operations and completely abandoned the right-of-way within 2 years of closing down. The Prince Crossing Substation building was then repurposed as a mapmaker's shop, the Sidwell Studio, a regional U.S. Midwest mapmaker, employing 40 people. Joe Sidwell, the company founder, as part of his life's work, also attempted a map of the Chicago area, recreating the time before the arrival of the Europeans. Sidwell proudly displayed this large map within the lobby of the building. Sidwell's studio moved out of the Prince Crossing station to a larger facility along North Avenue by the mid-1960s.
DuPage County took ownership of the former CA&E right-of-way within DuPage County in 1965 as part of the pioneering transformation of the Illinois Prairie Path, one of the first rails-to-trails conversions in the United States. An arts, crafts, and antique store then took up residence in the Prince Crossing station for a few years, in the late 1960s and early 1970s.
The Prince Crossing substation and associated few acres of land were eventually sold by the remaining legal entity of the Chicago Aurora and Elgin Railroad to Glenn and Joan Fries of Glendale Heights in the early 1970s. The Frieses owned the property until June of 1987, when they sold the building and land to Marvin W. Heineberg of Bloomingdale. It is not clear what purpose either the Frieses or Heinebergs had for the Prince Crossing property, but during this time the building structure fell into disrepair. The East Passenger Waiting Room addition in particular was in danger of collapsing. In 1991, local historian Jerry Hund visited Prince Crossing and captured these images of the structure on video.
Then in June of 2000, a very serious but non-lethal accident occurred right on the doorstep of the Prince Crossing station, when a woman cyclist on the Illinois Prairie Path, with visibility perhaps hampered by the Prince Crossing building and by foliage, shot across the road in the early morning hours, only to be hit by a southbound automobile traveling at 40 miles per hour. The woman, a physician, was critically injured in the collision and took several months to recover. Triggered by this accident and by complaints from local residents, the city of West Chicago, citing visibility and safety concerns, rerouted the Illinois Prairie Path along the east side of Prince Crossing Road, several hundred feet north to the Great Western Trail, in late 2001. Path users could then pick up the Elgin route several hundred feet west at the former crossing of the Chicago Great Western and Chicago Aurora and Elgin railroads.
The Salt Creek Model Railroad Club leased the Prince Crossing buildings from Marvin Heineberg for about 20 years, from the early 1990s onwards, and it was they that slowly rebuilt the passenger annex over a period of years, making it structurally sound and usable once more. They also repaired many other structural issues associated with the old building during their long stay. In early 2010, the Prince Crossing parcel of land, then part of Wayne Township in unincorporated DuPage County, was annexed into the city of West Chicago.
Wheaton Academy, just to the south of the Prince Crossing station, by now sought to expand their burgeoning campus to the north and negotiated a deal with DuPage County, purchasing a portion of the former CA&E right-of-way, a segment of the Illinois Prairie Path 1,500 feet in length and 100 feet wide, from a few hundred feet east of the Great Western Crossing to just west of the former depot, for $86,000 in May of 2005. Several years later, the Academy purchased the former CA&E depot on approximately 1 acre of land in late 2013 for $225,000 from Marvin Hainberg. By mid-2014, the Academy completed their northern acquisitions, purchasing the remaining CA&E right-of-way directly south of the depot building from DuPage County for $25,000. The purchases of the former CA&E right-of-way in particular are noteworthy, as the Illinois Prairie Path had always fought hard against incursions and encroachments of the original trail's right-of-way. In fact, there have been very few such incursions in all of DuPage County since the founding of the Illinois Prairie Path.
Shortly after the depot purchase in 2015, Eugene A. Frost, then head of Wheaton Academy, alleviated fears of the Prince Crossing station being torn down, stating, "The old station has historical significance to the school. Kids would come to the school on the train in the 1950s, and the station was a big deal." However, less than 8 years later, in early 2023, Wheaton Academy changed their position, seeking a permit from the West Chicago City Council to demolish the historic CA&E structure, citing the difficulty and expense of maintaining the old building. Despite protests from local historians and rail fans, as this structure was one of only 4 remaining CA&E stations in the Chicago area, the only remaining original CA&E substation in DuPage County, and one of the last remnants of the western suburbs' momentous transition to electric power, the City Council of West Chicago, whose city motto is "Where History and Progress Meet," granted their request.
In the next episode of this video series, we'll describe ongoing efforts to save the Prince Crossing station. We'll then take you on a tour of this old interurban railroad structure, plumbing the hidden secrets of its dark labyrinth basement, investigating the purpose of the Western Addition, and revealing new evidence related to the intricate industrial design of the structures that house the once high-tech dynamos of the early 20th century.
Many thanks to our Be Historic channel community, our loyal subscribers, and our generous Patreon supporters. As always, if you enjoy these videos, please remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share. And if you are so inclined, consider supporting our channel via Patreon. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you, in a manner of speaking, in our next video adventure.